Ancient Greece never began with Athens. Before the Parthenon, before Sparta, before democracy, Socrates, or Alexander, the Aegean was already home to sophisticated civilizations, and almost everything about their political world would disappear. On Crete, beginning in the 2nd millennium BC, the civilization we call Minoan built palace complexes at places such as Knossos, Phaistos, and Malea. The name is modern, inspired by the legendary King Minos. We do not know what these people called themselves. Their world was tied to the sea. Crete sat between mainland Greece, Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant, inside a Mediterranean network that moved metals, ceramics, oil, wine, luxury goods, and ideas. Minoan frescoes show processions, animals, plants, and figures apparently leaping over bulls. Their art feels remarkably alive, but their own voice remains frustratingly distant. They used a script we call Linear A, and it has never been fully deciphered. We can study their buildings and objects, but much of what they thought remains unreadable. Then the Aegean changed. The eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, was one of the most powerful volcanic events of the ancient world. It devastated the island and affected the surrounding region. For years, it was tempting to imagine one explosion ending Minoan civilization. The evidence is more complicated. Crete continued after the eruption. Palaces remained active. Whatever damage Thera caused, it was not the whole explanation, because another power was rising on mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans. Their centers looked different. Mycenae, Tyrans, Pylos, and other sites were tied to fortified palaces, warrior elites, and bureaucratic control. At Mycenae, massive stone walls later seemed so ancient that Greeks believed only Cyclopes could have built them. And unlike Linear A, we can read the Mycenaean script. Linear B was deciphered in the 20th century. The language was an early form of Greek. The tablets are not heroic poems. They are administrative records: livestock, workers, land, offerings, goods, and weapons. But that is exactly why they matter. They reveal organized palace economies in which rulers and officials manage resources across large territories. By the 15th century BC, Mycenaean influence had reached Crete. Linear B appeared at Knossos. The political center of gravity in the Aegean was shifting toward the mainland. Centuries later, Greeks remembered this distant age through stories of Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus, and Troy. Archaeology confirms that a major settlement existed at Hisarlik in northwestern Anatolia, and that it was destroyed and rebuilt repeatedly. Some destruction layers belong broadly to the Late Bronze Age. Was there a Trojan War behind the legends? Possibly. Was it the war described by Homer? We cannot know. The Iliad and Odyssey were shaped by generations of oral tradition. They preserve memory, myth, poetry, and identity, not a modern battlefield report. Then around 1200 BC, the entire eastern Mediterranean entered crisis. Palaces burned, trade networks fractured, kingdoms vanished. The Hittite Empire collapsed. Cities in the Levant were destroyed. Egypt survived severe pressure, and in Greece, the Mycenaean palace system disappeared. There is no single proven cause. Drought, earthquakes, warfare, migration, rebellion, trade disruption, and the groups Egyptian records call the Sea Peoples may all have played roles. The important point is that Bronze Age kingdoms were deeply connected. That made them powerful and vulnerable. When enough parts of the system failed, collapse could spread. Linear B disappeared. Palace bureaucracy vanished. Some settlements contracted or were abandoned. Long-distance exchange declined. Older histories called the following centuries the Greek Dark Age. The term can mislead. People did not vanish. Communities survived, farmed, fought, moved, and traded. But the political world had changed. Then slowly, Greece began to recover. Population increased, trade expanded, iron became more important, stories about the lost heroic age survived. And Greeks eventually began writing again, not by reviving Linear B, but by adapting a Phoenician alphabet. Most importantly, they did not rebuild the old palace kingdoms. They created something different: the polis, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, Argos, hundreds of independent communities with their own laws, armies, and political interests. They would share language, gods, sanctuaries, and stories. And they would fight one another constantly. That is the contradiction at the center of the story. Ancient Greece developed a powerful cultural identity without becoming one political state. And from that fragmented world would come ideas that survived long after the palaces, armies, and cities that created them had lost their power. By the 8th century BC, Greece was changing quickly. Communities were growing, Mediterranean trade was expanding, and the Greeks had adopted a new writing system from the Phoenicians, modifying it to represent Greek sounds, including vowels. The result was the Greek alphabet. Writing could now preserve laws, dedications, accounts, political decisions, and poetry. Traditions that had survived orally for generations began appearing in written form. Among them were the Iliad and the Odyssey, traditionally associated with Homer. These poems looked backward toward a vanished heroic age, but they also helped scattered communities imagine a shared cultural world. The Greeks did not live under one ruler. They increasingly shared gods, heroes, language, rituals, and stories. Politically, however, they were becoming intensely local. The central institution was the polis, usually translated as city-state. But a polis was more than a city. It included an urban center surrounding land, religious institutions, and above all, a political community. Athens was a polis. Sparta was a polis. So were Corinth, Thebes, Argos, Miletus, and hundreds of others. Each could have its own laws, government, army, calendar, alliances, and sense of independence. There was no government of all Greece. Athens could choose war, while another Greek city chose neutrality. Sparta could form one alliance, while Thebes joined another. What connected the Greeks was culture. What divided them was politics. Geography reinforced that fragmentation. Mountains and valleys separated communities, while the sea connected them outward. Greece developed less like a centralized kingdom and more like a network of ports, islands, and independent cities. Then the network expanded. From roughly the 8th through 6th centuries BC, Greek communities founded settlements across the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Southern Italy, Sicily, the coast of modern France, North Africa, Anatolia, the Black Sea. These settlements were not provinces of one Greek empire. Many became independent polis with religious and cultural ties to their founders. Expansion also meant contact. Greeks traded and competed with Phoenicians, Egyptians, Lydians, Persians, Scythians, Etruscans, and many others. That matters because Greece did not develop in isolation. Its alphabet grew from Phoenician writing. Its art absorbed influences from Egypt and the Near East. Its merchants entered networks far older than classical Athens. Greek civilization was innovative precisely because it was connected. Inside the polis, warfare was also changing. The iconic Greek infantryman was the hoplite, carrying a large round shield and spear and fighting in close formation. The exact development of hoplite warfare remains debated, but collective discipline became central. A soldier's shield protected not only himself, but the man beside him. That created a political question. If citizens were expected to defend the polis, how much voice should they have in governing it? Greek cities produced different answers. Some remained dominated by aristocratic families. Some experienced rule by men the Greeks called tyrants, rulers who seized power outside traditional constitutional arrangements. Some tyrants were violent, others sponsored temples, festivals, and economic development. The argument was larger than any one regime. Who should rule? One man? A few families? A broader body of citizens? And who counted as a citizen at all? Greek political experimentation existed alongside exclusion. Women, enslaved people, and foreigners were normally outside the citizen body. The polis could create intense participation for some while denying it completely to others. Religion helped create a wider Greek identity. At Delphi, people from many cities consulted the oracle of Apollo. At Olympia, athletes competed in festivals associated with Zeus. These institutions were pan-Hellenic, shared across the Greek world. But even here, unity came through competition. An athlete represented his city. Victory brought prestige home. The Greeks gathered together in order to defeat other Greeks. That pattern repeated everywhere. Shared gods, rival cities, shared language, local identities, shared festivals, constant competition. And gradually, Greeks developed a stronger distinction between themselves and non-Greek speakers. Yet the people who recognized a common culture remained perfectly willing to fight one another, sometimes brutally. This political instability was not a temporary flaw. It was the normal condition of Greek history. And nowhere would the contrast become more powerful than in two cities, Athens and Sparta. One would become famous for debate, naval power, theater, and democracy. The other for discipline, land warfare, and an extraordinary social system built to preserve a warrior elite. They belonged to the same Greek world, but they offered radically different answers to one question: what should a polis be? To understand Sparta, you have to begin with what the legend often hides. The famous Spartan warrior system depended on a much larger subordinated population. Spartan male citizens, the Spartiates, were expected to devote themselves to military readiness and collective discipline. But they could do that because Helots, especially in Laconia and conquered Messenia, produced much of the agricultural surplus supporting the citizen class. The Helots greatly outnumbered the Spartiates. That created permanent insecurity. Sparta was not only preparing to fight foreign enemies, its citizen army also existed inside a society that had to control a population capable of rebellion. That helps explain the intensity of Spartan institutions. Boys entered the state-supervised educational system, traditionally called the agoge. Training emphasized endurance, discipline, physical ability, and loyalty to the group. Adult citizens ate in common messes and remained tied to military service. Later writers sometimes exaggerated Spartan practices, fascinated by a society that seemed unlike their own. But the broader reality is clear. Citizenship demanded an unusually intense commitment to the military community. Sparta also had a complex political system. Two kings from separate royal houses, a council of elders, an assembly of male citizens, officials called ephors. The city most famous for obedience was not governed by one simple dictator. Spartan women also held an unusual economic position compared with women in many Greek communities. They could own and inherit significant property and receive physical education. But political citizenship remained male. The distinctive position of Spartan women existed inside a society organized around maintaining the citizen body. Sparta's land army became the most respected in Greece. Then there was Athens. Athens developed across Attica, connected to the sea and eventually to a large commercial world. Its political system emerged not from one moment of invention, but from repeated crises. Early Athens was dominated by aristocratic families. Debt and social tension produced demands for reform. Draco became famous for severe written laws. Then came Solon. Around the beginning of the 6th century BC, Solon was given exceptional authority to address the crisis. He abolished forms of debt bondage and reorganized aspects of political participation. He did not create full democracy, but he changed the political structure. Tensions remained, and Athens later came under the tyrant Pisistratus. His rule was not simply a period of destruction. Public projects and festivals expanded, and the city continued developing. After his sons lost power, another reformer transformed Athens, Cleisthenes. Around 508 or 507 BC, reforms associated with him reorganized citizens into new political units, weakened older aristocratic networks, and strengthened institutions such as the Council of 500 and the Citizen Assembly. This was the beginning of Athenian democracy. But the word needs precision. Athens was democratic for male citizens. Women could not vote. Enslaved people had no political rights. Resident foreigners were excluded from citizenship. A large part of the population had no direct voice. Within the citizen body, however, something radical was happening. Citizens could gather and vote directly on major questions: war, peace, finance, foreign policy. They did not elect a modern parliament to make every major decision for them. The polis, at least in principle, belonged to its citizens. Athens even developed ostracism, a mechanism that could exile a citizen for 10 years without a criminal conviction. Thousands of pottery fragments survive with names scratched onto them. It was democracy written on broken ceramic. But Athens should not be reduced to freedom, just as Sparta should not be reduced to war. Athens fought constantly. It enslaved people. It would build an empire and punish rebellious allies. Sparta practiced diplomacy, compromise, and political calculation. Neither city fits the mythology built around it, and neither represented all Greece. Corinth, Thebes, Argos, and Greek cities across Sicily and Anatolia had their own histories. Still, Athens and Sparta increasingly became competing centers of power. Sparta's greatest strength was on land. Athens would build its future at sea. The decisive resource came from silver at Laurion. When a major vein was exploited in the early 5th century BC, the politician Themistocles argued that Athens should use the wealth to build triremes. The immediate context involved rivalry with Aegina, but the fleet would soon matter for a much larger reason. Because east of the Aegean stood a power unlike anything the Greek city-states had created, the Persian Empire. Greek cities already lived under Persian authority in Anatolia. Some rebelled. Athens became involved. And eventually, the Persian king turned toward mainland Greece. Suddenly, the rivalries between Athens and Sparta became secondary to a larger question. Could independent Greek cities survive an empire? In 490 BC, a Persian force landed at Marathon. Athens marched to meet it. Sparta would not arrive in time. The Persian Wars are often remembered as a simple story. Free Greeks against a vast Eastern empire. The reality was more complicated. Persia was one of the most sophisticated states of the ancient world, governing an enormous multicultural territory through roads, provincial administration, and systems of tribute. And the Greeks were not united. Some resisted Persia, some cooperated, others tried to remain neutral. The conflict had begun along the Anatolian coast, where Greek cities rebelled against Persian rule in the Ionian Revolt. Athens sent support. The revolt failed. Darius I did not forget. In 490 BC, Persian forces crossed the Aegean and landed at Marathon. Athens asked Sparta for help. According to Herodotus, the Spartans agreed, but were delayed by religious obligations. So when the decisive battle came, Athenians and their Plataean allies faced the Persians without the Spartan army. Ancient numbers are unreliable, but Persia probably held a numerical advantage. The Athenians attacked. Their heavily armed hoplites closed with the Persian line. The Greek center was pressured, but the wings succeeded and turned inward. The Persians retreated toward their ships. Athens had survived. Later tradition created the famous story of a messenger running from Marathon to Athens and dying after announcing victory. Herodotus instead describes the runner Pheidippides making the much longer journey from Athens to Sparta before the battle. The legend changed. The meaning of Marathon did not. Athens had learned that Persia could be defeated, but only one expedition had failed. 10 years later, Darius' son Xerxes returned with a far larger invasion. Persian engineers bridged the Hellespont. Supplies were prepared. A huge army and fleet moved into Greece. Now the city-states had to decide whether they could cooperate. A coalition formed. Sparta became central on land. Athens provided the fleet that Themistocles had spent years building. The first legendary stand came at Thermopylae. King Leonidas led 300 Spartiates, but they were not alone. Thousands of other Greeks initially defended the pass, including Thespians, Thebans, and contingents from other cities. The narrow terrain limited Persia's ability to use superior numbers. For 2 days, the defenders held. Then Ephialtes revealed a mountain route around the position. Leonidas knew the pass was lost. Much of the Greek force withdrew. A smaller force remained, including the Spartans and hundreds of Thespians. They were destroyed. Persia won Thermopylae, but defeat became a story of resistance. At the same time, Greek and Persian fleets fought near Artemisium. When Thermopylae fell, the Greek fleet withdrew. The road south opened. Athens could not be defended. Much of the population evacuated. Persian forces entered the city and attacked the Acropolis. Athens burned. By almost any normal measure, Xerxes was winning. Then Themistocles forced the strategic question toward the sea. The Greek fleet gathered near Salamis. The coalition argued. Some wanted to withdraw. Themistocles understood that narrow water could do what the pass at Thermopylae had done on land: reduce Persia's numerical advantage. According to Herodotus, he even sent a deceptive message suggesting the Greeks were preparing to escape. The Persian fleet entered the straits. Then the Greeks attacked. In the confined water, the larger Persian force struggled to maneuver. Ships collided. Formations became confused. The Greek fleet won a devastating victory. Salamis changed the war. Xerxes returned to Asia with part of his force, though a major Persian army remained under Mardonius. In 479 BC, a Greek coalition defeated that army at Plataea. Around the same time, Greek forces won at Mycale. The invasion had failed. Mainland Greece remained outside Persian control. The Greeks had survived because they cooperated. Then victory transformed the balance of power. Sparta remained the most prestigious land power. Athens emerged with an enormous fleet and new confidence. Greek cities around the Aegean still feared Persia, so an alliance formed around Athens, the Delian League. Members contributed ships or money. At first, the stated purpose was collective defense and continued war against Persia. But alliances change when one member becomes much stronger than the others. Athens increasingly controlled the league. States that tried to leave could be forced back. Tribute continued to flow. The treasury was eventually moved from Delos to Athens. An alliance was becoming an empire. And here is the central irony. Athens celebrated its role in defending Greek freedom from Persian rule. Then it created a system in which other Greek cities discovered that escaping Athenian control could be extremely difficult. That empire would help finance the cultural explosion we call the Golden Age. The Parthenon, drama, philosophy, historical writing. But Sparta was watching. The Persian Wars had forced Athens and Sparta together. Victory removed the reason they needed each other, and the next great enemy of the Greeks would not come from Persia. It would be other Greeks. A generation after Persia burned Athens, the city was becoming the cultural center of the Greek world. But the Athens that built the Parthenon was also the center of an empire. That contradiction matters. By the middle of the 5th century BC, Athens possessed a huge navy, tribute from allies, commercial connections across the Aegean, and a political system that gave thousands of male citizens direct participation in public decisions. At the center of this period stood Pericles. He was not a king, but for decades his political influence was extraordinary. Athenian democracy expanded. Citizens served on large juries. The assembly debated war, finance, diplomacy, and public projects. Compensation for some forms of public service made participation easier for citizens without great wealth. A farmer could stand in the same political space as a rich man and vote. That was radical, but only inside the citizen body. Women were excluded from formal political participation. Resident foreigners were excluded from citizenship. Enslaved people had no political rights. Athens was extraordinarily participatory for some and profoundly unequal for others. Its economy also depended on slavery. Enslaved people worked in homes, workshops, agriculture, and the dangerous silver mines at Laurion. The Golden Age was never golden for everyone, and part of its wealth came from empire. The Delian League had begun as an alliance against Persia. By the age of Pericles, Athens exercised direct control over many members. Tribute flowed into the city. Attempts to leave could be punished. Then the League treasury was transferred from Delos to Athens. The symbolism was unmistakable. Athens stood at the center. On the Acropolis, that power became stone. The Parthenon was dedicated to Athena, but it was also a political statement. Athens had survived. Athens had wealth. Athens could build at a scale the Greek world would remember. Its architecture used subtle adjustments in columns and platform to create visual harmony. Inside stood the enormous gold and ivory statue of Athena associated with Phidias. Religion, art, and power occupied the same building. Nearby, another Greek achievement was developing: theater. At festivals honoring Dionysus, audiences watched tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Oedipus searching for a truth that will destroy him. Antigone caught between state authority and obligations she believes are higher. The women of Troy living with the consequences of a war they did not choose. These plays ask questions about law, violence, responsibility, and power. Comedy could be even more direct. Aristophanes mocked politicians, war, and intellectual life, sometimes before thousands of citizens whose own city was the target. Argument was everywhere, in the assembly, in the courts, on the stage, and in philosophy. Socrates wrote nothing himself. He became famous for questioning people who believed they understood justice, courage, virtue, or knowledge. His method was dangerous because questions exposed contradictions. Plato, influenced by Socrates, later wrote about politics, ethics, knowledge, and reality. Plato's student Aristotle investigated logic, biology, ethics, politics, literature, and nature. But Greek philosophy did not begin with three men in Athens. Earlier thinkers in Ionia had already asked whether the natural world could be explained through observable causes rather than only mythic narratives. Greek medicine associated with Hippocrates likewise reflects attempts to understand illness through observation and natural explanation. Many conclusions were wrong. The method still mattered. Observe, compare, explain. History itself changed. Herodotus investigated the wars between Greeks and Persians through stories, geography, customs, and competing accounts. Thucydides, writing about the war that would tear Greece apart, focused more sharply on power, fear, interest, and political calculation. This is where lists of Greek achievements can become misleading. Democracy, philosophy, theater, history, medicine, architecture. It begins to sound like a peaceful intellectual paradise. It wasn't. These achievements emerged inside a world of war, slavery, and imperial competition. Athens could celebrate freedom while controlling allies. Naxos and other states discovered that leaving the Athenian system was difficult. Ships required money. Money came from tribute. Tribute required compliance, and compliance sometimes required force. Sparta watched Athenian power grow. It led its own alliance in the Peloponnese and remained the strongest land power in Greece. Athens dominated the sea. Two alliance systems now faced each other. Thucydides later identified the growth of Athenian power and the fear it created in Sparta as fundamental to the conflict. Then crisis followed crisis. Pericles believed Athens could avoid a decisive land battle. Its long walls connected the city to Piraeus. As long as the fleet controlled the sea, Athens could survive Spartan invasions of Attica. The strategy made sense. Then disease arrived. People from the countryside crowded behind the walls. In 430 BC, a devastating epidemic struck. We still cannot identify the disease with certainty. Thousands died, social order weakened, and in 429 BC, Pericles died. The man most associated with Athens at its height was gone. The Golden Age was being swallowed by a war Athens thought it could manage, and a disease no strategy could control. The conflict had barely begun. The Peloponnesian War began in 431 BC. Athens and Sparta had once fought together against Persia. Now they stood at the center of rival Greek systems. Sparta possessed the most feared land army. Athens possessed the strongest navy. Pericles' strategy was to refuse the battle Sparta wanted. When Spartan armies invaded Attica, rural Athenians moved behind the walls. The fleet kept supplies moving through Piraeus, while Athenian ships attacked elsewhere. Then the epidemic devastated the overcrowded city. Pericles died, and Athens became politically less stable. The war grew darker. When Mytilene rebelled against Athenian control, the assembly initially voted to kill its adult men and enslave the women and children. A ship carried the order. Then the Athenians reconsidered. A second debate reversed the decision, and another ship raced after the first, arriving in time to prevent the larger massacre. The episode captures the contradiction of Athenian democracy. Public debate could restrain violence, but the same democracy had almost authorized mass punishment. In 425 BC, Athens trapped Spartan troops on Sphacteria. More than 100 Spartiates surrendered. For Greece, it was shocking. The warriors associated with Thermopylae had laid down their weapons. Sparta's aura of invincibility cracked. Then the Spartan commander Brasidas changed the balance through a campaign in northern Greece. He captured Amphipolis, an important Athenian possession. One Athenian commander connected with the failed response was exiled. His name was Thucydides. That exile helped place him in the position from which he would write one of history's greatest accounts of war. In 422 BC, Brasidas and the Athenian politician Cleon both died near Amphipolis. The Peace of Nicias followed. It did not hold. Distrust remained, alliances shifted. Then Athens made the most disastrous strategic decision of the war: Sicily. In 415 BC, Athens sent a massive expedition against Syracuse. The arguments were strategic, imperial, and ambitious. One of its strongest advocates was Alcibiades, wealthy, brilliant, controversial, and almost impossible to separate from political chaos. Shortly before departure, sacred herms were mutilated across Athens. Alcibiades became entangled in accusations of sacrilege. The expedition sailed. Then Athens recalled him for trial. He did not return. He defected to Sparta. One of the men who had promoted the expedition was now advising Athens' enemy. In Sicily, the campaign deteriorated. Syracuse resisted. Spartan help arrived. Athens sent reinforcements, increasing what was at risk. The fleet became trapped. Attempts to escape failed. The army retreated overland. Exhausted soldiers were attacked, separated, and surrounded. At the Asinaris River, discipline collapsed as men rushed desperately for water. The expedition ended in catastrophe. Much of the force was killed or captured. Prisoners were confined in terrible conditions in the stone quarries of Syracuse. Athens lost ships, soldiers, money, and prestige. For many states, that would have ended the war. Athens kept fighting, but revolts spread through its empire. Persia entered the conflict indirectly, providing financial support that helped Sparta build a serious navy. The irony was extraordinary. Greeks had once united against Persia. Now Sparta accepted Persian money to defeat Athens. Athens itself suffered an oligarchic coup in 411 BC. Democracy returned, and the city continued winning battles. Then after victory at Arginusi in 406 BC, a storm prevented the rescue of many sailors. Political anger exploded. Several victorious generals were tried and executed. Athens had won the battle and then killed some of the men who had won it. Finally came Lysander. With Persian support, the Spartan commander rebuilt naval power. In 405 BC, he caught the Athenian fleet vulnerable at Aegospotami and captured almost all of it. Athens had lost the navy protecting its empire and grain routes. In 404 BC, the city surrendered. The long walls were torn down. The empire vanished. Sparta had won. Then Sparta demonstrated the same problem Athens had. Victory creates power. Power creates fear. Sparta imposed influence across Greece and supported the oligarchic 30 tyrants in Athens. Their rule was violent and brief. Democracy returned. But the wider Greek system remained unstable. New coalitions formed against Sparta. Persia intervened repeatedly. Athens recovered part of its influence. Then Thebes rose. In 371 BC, at Leuctra, a Theban army led by Epaminondas defeated Sparta. Spartan military prestige was shattered, and Theban power helped free Messenia from Spartan domination. The labor system supporting the Spartan citizen class was permanently weakened. First Athens, then Sparta, then Thebes. One city rose. Others became afraid. New alliances formed. War followed. And while the Poleis exhausted themselves, a kingdom to the north was changing. Macedonia. Its king Philip II reorganized the army, combining the long sarissa pike with cavalry, specialist troops, diplomacy, marriage alliances, bribery, and war. The Greek city-states had spent generations perfecting warfare against one another. Philip studied them all. Then he built something stronger. In 338 BC, Athens and Thebes confronted Macedonia at Chaeronea. They lost. Among the Macedonian commanders was Philip's young son, Alexander. For more than a century, Greeks had feared Persia might take away their independence. Instead, they weakened one another until Macedonia became powerful enough to dominate them. Then came the final irony. Philip planned an invasion of Persia. He was assassinated. His 20-year-old son inherited the kingdom, the army, and the plan. Philip II died in 336 BC. Almost immediately, enemies tested his 20-year-old heir. Alexander secured the Macedonian throne, eliminated rivals, and campaigned north. Then a rumor spread that he had died. Thebes rebelled. Alexander marched south with astonishing speed. In 335 BC, Macedonian forces stormed the city. Thebes was destroyed, thousands were killed, and thousands more enslaved. The message to the rest of Greece was clear. Alexander was young, he was not weak. The following year, he crossed into Asia to begin the campaign Philip had planned against Persia. For more than a century, Persia had shaped Greek politics. Persian kings had invaded Greece. Greek mercenaries had served Persian rulers. Persian money had influenced Greek wars. Now a Macedonian king claimed to lead a pan-Hellenic war against the empire that had once burned Athens. Alexander's army was not enormous by Persian standards. It was exceptionally effective. The Macedonian phalanx carried the long sarissa. Companion cavalry provided a powerful striking force. Light infantry, engineers, scouts, and siege specialists operated as parts of one system. At the Granicus River, Alexander defeated Persian forces in open western Anatolia. In 333 BC, he met Darius III at Issus. The Persian king fled. His family fell into Alexander's hands. Alexander treated them with respect, helping build the image of a man who did not intend merely to destroy the Persian monarchy. He intended to inherit it. Before pursuing Darius inland, Alexander secured the eastern Mediterranean coast. Most cities submitted. Tyre did not. The island city resisted for months. Alexander's engineers built a causeway from the mainland, while naval forces tightened the siege. When Tyre finally fell, the punishment was severe. Then Alexander entered Egypt, where Persian control collapsed with little resistance. On the Mediterranean coast, he founded Alexandria. It would become one of the great cities of the ancient world. But Darius still lived. In 331 BC, the two kings met at Gaugamela. The Persians had chosen open ground and prepared the battlefield. Alexander's line was stretched. Persian cavalry threatened parts of the Macedonian formation. Then Alexander found an opening and drove toward the Persian center. Darius fled. Alexander entered Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis. The ceremonial heart of Persian kingship was later burned. Ancient sources disagree over the reason: revenge, political symbolism, drunken destruction, or some combination. Then Alexander pursued Darius east. Darius was seized and killed by men from his own side. Alexander treated the dead king as a monarch. The campaign now changed. The conqueror of Persia was becoming a Persian king. He adopted elements of Persian court practice. Iranian elites entered his administration. Persian troops entered his forces. He married Roxana from Central Asia. Later, at Susa, Alexander and many officers married women from Persian aristocratic families. Some Macedonians were deeply uncomfortable. They had conquered Persia. Their king seemed to be changing with the empire he had conquered. Was Alexander spreading Greek culture? Or was Persia transforming Alexander? Both. That is why his story matters here. The conquest did not simply replace one civilization with another, it created new mixtures. Alexander continued through Central Asia, where resistance was fierce and warfare became less like the great battles against Darius and more like years of mountain campaigns, fortresses, and rebellion. Then he moved toward the Indian subcontinent. In 326 BC, he defeated King Porus at the Hydaspes River. Alexander wanted to continue east. His army refused. At the Hyphasis River, after years of campaigning, his soldiers stopped him. He turned back. The return was costly. Alexander led part of the army through the Gedrosian Desert, where heat, thirst, and exhaustion killed many. Eventually, he returned to Babylon. By then, the political map had been transformed. A Macedonian king controlled territory stretching from Greece and Egypt through the former Persian Empire towards Central and South Asia. Greek and Macedonian settlers lived in new cities far from the Aegean. Merchants, administrators, and artists followed. Alexander began planning more campaigns. Then in 323 BC, he became ill. He died at 32. The exact cause remains uncertain, and he left no adult heir capable of holding the empire together. His generals fought, the empire fractured, Ptolemy took Egypt, Seleucus eventually controlled enormous territories in Asia. Macedonia passed through other dynastic struggles. Alexander's unified empire disappeared almost immediately, but the Hellenistic world survived. Greek became an important language of administration, trade, and elite culture across much of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. Alexandria became a center of scholarship. Euclid's Elements shaped mathematics. Eratosthenes estimated the Earth's circumference with remarkable success. Archimedes transformed mathematics and mechanics. But this was never a simple story of Greek culture replacing everyone else. Egypt remained deeply Egyptian. Babylonian intellectual traditions survived. Iranian societies remained rooted. New rulers adapted to the people they governed. The Hellenistic world was a world of exchange, conflict, and fusion. And that creates one of the final ironies of Greek history. For centuries, Greek cities had resisted political unity. Then Macedonia conquered them. Alexander conquered Persia, and Greek culture traveled farther than the independent polis ever had, precisely when the polis was no longer the dominant political force. Then another power rose in the West, Rome. Politically, Rome would conquer the Greek world. Culturally, the result would be far less simple. In 146 BC, Roman forces destroyed Corinth. The age of independent Greek power was fading, but the conquerors were already fascinated by the civilization they were defeating. Roman elites learned Greek. Greek teachers educated Roman children. Collectors filled villas with Greek art and Roman copies of Greek originals. Roman writers studied Greek literature and philosophy. Rome conquered Greece militarily. Greek culture entered Rome. That did not mean Rome simply became Greek. Roman civilization had its own institutions, traditions, and political identity. What happened was adaptation. Romans borrowed, translated, argued with, and transformed what they inherited. And because Roman power stretched across the Mediterranean and far beyond it, Greek ideas traveled into regions that Athens and Sparta had never controlled. Philosophical schools continued under Roman rule. Plato and Aristotle were studied. Stoicism became influential among Roman elites, eventually reaching figures such as Marcus Aurelius. Roman literature openly engaged with Greek models. Virgil's Aeneid exists in conversation with Homer. Greek architectural forms appeared throughout the Roman world, combined with Roman engineering, concrete, arches, vaults, and domes. In the Western Empire, Latin dominated. Across much of the Eastern Mediterranean, Greek remained a major language of commerce, scholarship, administration, and everyday life. The New Testament was written in Greek. Early Christian thinkers operated in a world shaped by Greek language and intellectual traditions. Then the Western Roman Empire collapsed. Greek knowledge did not simply disappear. In the Eastern Roman Byzantine world, Greek language and literature continued for centuries. Manuscripts were copied and studied. Greek scientific and philosophical works also traveled through Syriac and Arabic intellectual traditions. Under Islamic rule, scholars translated, studied, criticized, and expanded works associated with Aristotle, Galen, Ptolemy, Euclid, and others. Later, material moved again into Latin-speaking Europe. The survival of Greek knowledge was not a straight line from Athens to the modern West. It was a network. Greek writers, Roman readers, Byzantine scribes, Syriac translators, Muslim philosophers and scientists, Jewish scholars, Latin translators, generations of people who preserved old ideas by changing the context in which they lived. That is why the phrase "Greece created Western civilization" is too simple. No civilization creates the future alone. Greek thinkers themselves learned from older cultures around the Mediterranean and Near East. And modern political and scientific institutions emerged through many historical traditions. Take democracy. Modern representative democracy is not Athenian democracy. It developed through Roman republican traditions, medieval institutions, legal systems, political revolutions, Enlightenment arguments, and many other influences. Athens still mattered because it created one of history's most famous experiments in direct citizen government. Later thinkers admired it and feared it. Athens itself offered reasons for both. The democracy launched the Sicilian expedition. It executed generals after a victory, and in 399 BC, it condemned Socrates to death. A society famous for public argument executed one of history's most famous questioners. That contradiction never stopped mattering. How can citizens govern themselves wisely? Can popularity replace knowledge? How much disagreement can a political community tolerate? Greek thinkers did not give the world one answer. They gave it arguments. And perhaps that is the most durable part of the legacy. Plato distrusted democracy. Aristotle compared constitutions. Philosophical schools disagreed over what made a good life. Playwrights presented moral conflicts without easy solutions. Historians argued about causes. Greek intellectual culture was powerful not because everyone agreed, but because disagreement became productive. We should not romanticize it. Greeks could discuss freedom while owning slaves. Athenians could celebrate democracy while excluding women from political citizenship. Greek cities could condemn domination and then dominate weaker neighbors. Sparta's warrior society depended on the coercion of helots. Alexander spread Greek language and institutions through conquest. These are not footnotes. They are part of the civilization. And that brings us back to the beginning. Ancient Greece never really existed as one unified country. For most of its history, what we call Greece was a collection of independent communities. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, Argos, Miletus, Syracuse, hundreds more. They competed, traded, colonized, debated, formed alliances, broke alliances, and fought. When Persia invaded, some resisted and others cooperated. When Athens became powerful, other Greeks feared Athens. When Sparta won, other Greeks resisted Sparta. When Thebes rose, its dominance was temporary. Then Macedonia conquered them. There was never one Greek political story, but there was a shared cultural world. Language, gods, sanctuaries, festivals, poetry, stories about a heroic past. And inside that world, competing communities experimented with different answers. Who should rule? What makes a citizen? What is justice? What causes disease? How should history be written? What makes a tragedy powerful? What is the natural world made of? How do we know something is true? What does it mean to live well? Human beings in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, and elsewhere had been asking profound questions long before classical Greece. The Greeks did not invent human thought, but particular Greek traditions of debate, investigation, and written argument became extraordinarily influential because later societies preserved and reused them. The Parthenon survived in damaged form. Greek tragedies survived in manuscripts, philosophers survived in copies and quotations, Roman copies preserved sculptures whose Greek originals vanished. Archaeologists recovered cities. Papyrus fragments returned lost words. New discoveries still force historians to revise old conclusions. That is what history actually looks like. Not a finished monument, an investigation. Herodotus compared stories. Thucydides questioned reports and motives. Socrates refused to accept confident answers too easily. Their methods were imperfect. So are ours. But the instinct is recognizable. Ask, compare, challenge. Look again. The Persian Empire disappeared. Alexander's empire fractured. Rome eventually fell. The Byzantine Empire ended. The world of the polis vanished. But walk through a modern capital and Greek architectural forms still appear. Enter a theater and tragedy and comedy still carry ancient names. Open a philosophy book and Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are still being argued with. Discuss democracy and Athens eventually enters the conversation. Not because Greece created the modern world alone, it didn't. Not because it was a perfect civilization, it wasn't. But because ideas developed and contested inside that fragmented world became part of a much larger human inheritance. Athens wanted power. Sparta wanted security. Thebes wanted influence. Macedon wanted control. Alexander wanted conquest. None of them kept what they built. Their armies disappeared. Their political systems changed. Their empires collapsed. But the arguments survived. The questions survived. The civilization that could barely stay united changed the world because its ideas traveled farther than its armies. Ancient Greece was not a marble monument frozen in time. It was a noisy, competitive, violent, and creative world filled with people trying different answers to questions humanity still has not finished asking. They never truly created one Greece, but they created ideas the rest of the world refused to forget. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't the kind of channel that's going anywhere. We put out something like this every single day, the version of the story that survives contact with the actual evidence. Subscribing keeps you in that loop. And if this one stayed with you, send it to 5 people who'd sit through something this long with you. Not everyone will. Some people do. Leave a comment, a real one. Tell me what part of this actually surprised you. And tell me what civilization, what forgotten site, what quiet piece of hidden history you want us to look at next. We'll be here tomorrow, still digging.